Well, welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. My guest today is Eric Rowell. He is the founder and CEO of Second, which was part of the YC batch of Winter 2023. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, great to be here and awesome to meet you, Stuart.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk with you about testing and AI. And I guess I'll just kind of give a little bit more context here. I've been learning how to program for the past 2 months after a failed attempt 10 years ago when I started programming, and all of the DevOps was just such a nightmare. And then the actual coding wasn't that intuitive for me. And so I gave up. And then once AI came out, I was like, oh, now it's here. Now it's finally here. Now now I have somebody at my side 24 hours a day who can answer all these questions and actually get through all the roadblocks. Now I do the courses, and now I just take a screenshot of the code and of the coding problems, and it does it for me. And I find that really, I learn from it, but also it's pretty cool to have this thing that can do it. But now I'm starting to worry about some of the things like Devon that are coming out that just do the whole coding process for you and build apps out of prompts. So I'm really excited to talk to you about where you think this is going, and what's your take on this, and then we'll get into testing.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, let's see, where should I start? High level, where I think AI has a role to play in software development. Do you think that would be good?
You're great. Great.
Cool. So I think there's a lot of places that I could start here, but I think one place I can start would be in reference to, why we created Second in the first place. So, the purpose of our company is to automate all mundane and grunt work types of engineering tasks. The reason for that is, quite frankly, like if you can imagine, so you said you're learning to code recently,
Yeah.
but imagine you go through a 4-year degree learning how to write software. So why did you do that? Why do people become software engineers in the first place? They're looking to like create something awesome, and build, amazing software for the world, and just really innovate and be creative. But what happens is, there's sort of a scam that happens. So like somewhat like you
Yeah.
go through the 4-year degree, get your computer science degree, you're all pumped up to build cool stuff, and then you join like a huge tech company, and you find that you spend the first year of your life doing all of this mundane grunt work stuff. Like
Yeah.
you don't get to like you don't always get to build cool stuff. Like
Yeah.
oftentimes
Yeah.
your first job will be migrating like PHP to Node, or like something really like crappy, right? And so there's like there's a reality check of what software development really is like at large companies, which is very different compared to startups or
Mm.
hobbyists who are like just building like cool, fun stuff like from a clean slate every time. So I feel that like the biggest opportunity here for AI is to help automate all of that stuff that happens at large companies. And about 50 to 80% of engineering work at large companies is like maintenance and like mundane grunt
Oh,
work.
man.
So
That's
we feel that like a great way to make an impact on the world here is to automate away all of that stuff and give people, the freedom to actually innovate and create new software for their customers.
very cool. Um, it's so interesting what you just said about, and it makes me think again that it's better to get a job at a startup, likely, as long as you're not too worried about the pay. Because I imagine that a lot of the people who just graduate with 4 years of software degree, and I imagine most of them already have an internship, and they probably did an internship at the company they want to work with, and then they go to that company. And do beginner software developers get paid the same at both a startup and at a larger company, or is it pretty different?
Oh, no, 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 no.
Okay.
And also, by the way, it's not that working at a startup is better. It's just
Yeah.
very different.
Yeah.
There's actually there's obviously pros and cons for both. I like to, like people early on in their career, I oftentimes tell people it's really great to get experience with both
Yeah.
ASAP.
Yeah.
Like if you can work at, a FANG company for 2 years and then work at a startup company for 2 years, you'll have a pretty nice, range of what those worlds are like. In
Mm.
terms of pay, obviously, like if you go to a large tech company here in the Bay Area right out of college, especially if you're doing something related to AI, you'll be banking it. You'll make a lot of money. Obviously, it's expensive to live here in the Bay Area, and the taxes are insane. So like most of the money you make will vanish, but you will make a lot of money. And that's, with a really great base salaries plus, RSU equity as well. The startups, on the other hand, especially if you can get in like really early before the seed stage, like there's a Goldilocks zone of like when the best time to get into a startup is if you're hoping to like, become a multimillionaire at some point in the future. That's joining a team at the founding engineer level. So
Mm-hmm.
like, so the founders started the company, they've built some stuff, they're getting close to PMF, they've raised some money, they hire like those first, three to five engineers. If you classify that as the founding team, like that's the best time to get in. Because the salaries won't be as good as the big tech companies, but you will get huge amounts of equity that would be life changing if there's some sort of exit for the company.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And so then a beginner engineer goes into one of these companies. Okay, I got to ask you, how is it going to change now? Now that we've got your guys' tool, now that we've got all these tools, how is it going to change to become a junior programmer?
How's it going to change? It depends on what time frame.
Mm-hmm.
So let me, I think to answer your question,
Sure,
just so I can like figure it out for myself.
sure,
I don't have the answer yet.
great.
So like before the world of AI, like I mentioned, only if like you have like a huge organization of engineers. A lot of them are like frontline workers, like doing like basic like React stuff, or like
Mm-hmm.
writing tests, or like doing migrations, building utilities, doing DevOps, or like maybe simple DevOps stuff. There's only a few, like if you have like the pyramid of like engineers in an organization, there's only a select few who are doing the truly creative and innovative work, like designing like the architecture of the whole company, or like designing like how the high levels, of the engineering system works. And so that's the world today. There's this pyramid, and like most of the engineers are just like grunt workers, and then you have some innovators,
Mm-hmm.
which is a smaller population. In the future, not too distant future, I think it's not controversial to say this, but I think not that engineers are going to be going away, but like the amount of engineers you need to
Mm-hmm.
do the same amount of things we're doing today is much less. And all that means is that like all of the like I mentioned earlier, all of the grunt work and mundane stuff, like things that don't require creativity, like purely like maintenance types of things, like things that can be automated, those things eventually just go away, and you just let the AI do that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different than the Industrial Revolution, like when people were building carriages and everything, like it was all built completely by hand. So you had all of these really skilled workers who could do specific parts, like someone building the wheels, someone building, um, yeah, the reins for the horses, whatever. And then with the Industrial Revolution and the invention of cars, like most of the heavy lifting is automated, and you just have a smaller number of humans kind of babysitting, the robots, and babysitting the system, and telling the system what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so that I think that is the future. What does that mean for junior engineers? It's kind of hard. And also before, like I'm still trying to figure out how to answer the question, but one other thing to throw into the mix is what's interesting now is so junior engineers. I'm thinking about like how are they learning
Yeah,
today?
yeah.
And you can resonate with this a little bit if you recently learned or recently dove back into coding using AI. There's two things. The barrier to entry is so much smaller now.
Yep,
Um, you can
yep.
you can learn any language, like the basics, pretty quickly. I'm not talking about like, using a tool to like build the code for me. I'm talking
Mm,
about like if you really want to learn how to build software, you need to understand the language and the concepts. And so
mm.
a
Yeah.
good way to learn using AI is not to say like, hey, ChatGPT, build me this web page, and then whatever it is, I just use it and don't ask any questions.
Yeah.
A better way to use AI is to ask ask a lot of questions, like what's a good way to design a web application? What language should I use? What's the standard library for this? Like, what's the best way to build a React component? And ask lots of questions, try stuff like write some code, give the code to ChatGPT and say, is this standard? Like, is there a performance problem with
Yeah.
this? Is there a better way to do this? So if you use AI to really help yourself learn and understand like the foundation of the language or computer science in general, I think it's going to help people learn really quickly.
Mhm.
That's one end of the spectrum. I've also observed like even like kids maybe like in middle school or high school, there is like I think there is a tendency for a lot of people to just like hope they can say like make me this web page and they get some code, they slap
Yeah.
it in and then
Yeah.
move on to the next thing. And then like if the code compiles, great, they don't ask questions. If it doesn't compile, they don't try to understand why it's failing. They just ask ChatGPT to do it again and do it again, like a brute force way of getting things to compile. And so obviously, like if you build software that way, you're going to end up with a big mess in
Uh-huh.
the end. It's okay, like if you're doing like a hobby project and learning stuff, it's fine. But obviously that wouldn't scale, you know, for a huge enterprise company with literally millions of lines of code. So I think all that being said, I think AI will actually like the people who really do care about learning computer
Mhm.
science and want to become good developers, it's going to make those people even better.
Yep.
The people who are just looking for like
A job.
just code to kind of work and they
Yeah.
just want to like get by, it's going to make them worse. So I think there's going to be a division of like the good engineers and the not so great engineers. And
Mhm.
the ones who are just looking for like quick, you know, like quick snippets of code and not understanding what's happening, they probably, you know, they probably won't be that successful in their careers, I would say.
And okay, so there's a lot we can go into there. Sort of brute force coding, millions of lines of code. There's so many things we could talk about. There's like a sense of I would like to ask you, what are your favorite parts about coding? Because we all the grunt work is going away, it seems like. Well, actually, here's a better question. Will there still be grunt work left? And if so, what type of grunt work?
I mean, our vision is to eliminate all grunt work.
Yeah.
So there's maybe a little bit later on this call, I could tell you a story about like the first time I automated something for an internship I worked at. But
Great.
like when you free yourself of all of that mundane stuff, it's very similar to what you've mentioned in the past about the relationship between stress and creativity. Um, there's some parallels to stress and like like an insane amount of like mundane and high levels of grunt work
Yes.
where like you're so busy you just don't even have the space to be creative. Um, and I think that like I mean all human beings they have creativity built into them at different levels. And if you could just eliminate all the grunt work stuff, it's really going to empower people to really tap into their like innovative capabilities and creative capabilities and really like solve like much bigger problems, you know, for the world and really like make a bigger impact at their own companies or like at the companies they work at. So, I mean, our aspiration is to eliminate all grunt work. I think whether second does it or not, I think most grunt work will be completely eliminated,
Mm,
and humans will be focused on like the more fun, creative parts of building for
yeah.
customers and building for the world, with some like management, like
Yeah.
managing,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know, our
Well,
like the common solution today is AI agents. Our solution is AI agents as well. So you do need to like manage like all of these agents doing
wait.
work.
Ooh, interesting. So what have you found are because I have a theory that we're essentially moving into a phase where bureaucracies as we know them will start to change. I think it's going to start to become a competitive disadvantage to have a company over 150 people, like a large
Oh
disadvantage.
yeah,
That's a that
that's
and
true.
a lot of people got angry at me on LinkedIn for saying that. Not angry there, but it was funny. And so so uh like the bureaucracies might change and management will change if that changes in the way that I'm predicting. But that's management of people. Then there's management of agents, and I've never thought about actually managing agents. So what have you learned about that process, and then how is it compared to humans, managing humans?
Gosh, how do you compare managing humans to agents? I actually haven't thought about it, but I have some ideas. Let's see. Let me start with managing agents. So, our solution, we're building lots of different AI agents that do different things. Our agents are specialized in making code-based transformations and like validating that code works. And like we have resolvers that try to repair code that's broken. So like a lot of these agents that are very specific to the types of things that we're doing. And so for us, managing those agents is really just about observability. All
Oh,
like
interesting. Yeah,
it's very like bottom line oriented. Like how many agents are running, how much does it cost to run the agents, like from a AI and infra perspective.
yeah.
Are they making good decisions? You can actually track. So we have this whole system called an agent trace. So we're actually we capture the entire flow of the agents working together and like the decisions that they make,
Whoa.
the actions that they take. So we have all that information. And so it's not like we only have a handful of enterprise customers today. Like we're still pretty
Mm,
early.
mm.
So today, like sifting through that like manually is working fine. But it won't be scalable. Eventually, when we have hundreds or thousands of customers, we need like a pretty robust observability system. And I can almost guarantee you that when this plays, there's going to be a lot of like AI startups who their ears perk up because there's a ton of these like AI agent observability types of companies out there.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a pretty common startup idea actually, and the reason is because we're going to need it. Um,
Yeah.
the future is like largely uh, like the work is done by AI agents, and you're going to need a way to like if you have like hundreds of AI agents like doing all of this work, you have to have some understanding of how they're performing and what they're
Yeah.
doing and where they should be focused on. So for AI agents, it's actually I think easier because it's very like it's very qualitative. It's very measurable. You can
Mm.
measure everything. Uh, you can like even for us, like we can identify like if a certain agent isn't performing well, or like a certain like we have this concept of modules and like plans that the agents put together, and we can measure if a plan is not performing well. So like all of these things are measurable. So in a
Wait,
sense, that makes it easier.
do you give
Yeah.
them carrots and sticks? Is that how you get them to perform better, or do you just say screw it, turn them off, code a new one?
So that's a great question. Here's why it's a good question. Um, for human beings, the answer is carrots and sticks.
Yeah.
But for AI agents, which is software, I can just go fix them. I don't have to convince them to be better employees. I just go
Yeah.
change something in the agent and make them a better employee.
Oh man, that's so
So in
interesting.
that sense, it's a little bit easier
And
because
that's
like
yeah.
that's why I
Okay.
was saying like I think managing AI agents is easier. Humans is way harder. Like
Yes.
human beings are very complex, and there's so many like I've been an engineering manager for many years at large companies and small, and there's so many like for all the people out there who haven't been an engineering manager, let me paint the picture for you. Um, so like you're an engineer, you have like your boss who's your engineering manager, and you think that they do nothing all day. Like you think that they just show up to meetings and like say a few dumb things in a meeting or something, and then like and they control like your performance reviews or your bonuses or whatever. The funny thing is like when you become a manager, there's this whole world that opens up where you see there's all of this like all of these personal problems that all of the people on the team have that you never knew existed.
Yeah.
It's like it's great. Like I
Uh,
remember when I first became a manager, I was like, "Oh my God, what have I done?" Because you have like your whole engineering team of like a team of engineers. You're all working together. Some people you like, some people maybe you don't like. Um, but when you become an engineering manager, like on like day one, they like unload all of these like personal problems on you, and you have to like work through. You're like working through like personal issues with each team members and like figuring out how to get people, to work nicely together. Like if you need to fire somebody or like it's very complex. Like, people are very complex, as you know.
Yeah.
And so that's it's a much harder job, is what I'm saying,
Yes,
to manage
absolutely,
people than
100%.
AI agents.
I've only done a little bit of it. I've done enough to know what it's like. But it's really interesting. And this goes into the earlier point. And as you were talking, I was thinking, well, maybe nothing is actually going to change because I mean, there are things that are going to change, but maybe the main
Yeah.
issues are still going to be the same. Uh,
So
yeah, go for it.
if you don't mind, I can touch on that. I think so. Earlier, I mentioned like, so I imagine engineering organizations as like almost like a pyramid,
Mm,
right? There's like a pyramid. There's like your top innovative, creative, like high impact, 10x engineers at the top. And then you have all of your like regular worker engineers kind of like towards the bottom. There's a lot of engineers who who became engineers for reasons other than like truly like wanting to build and like make an impact on the world. There's a lot of engineers who kind of like do the bare minimum and skate by.
yeah,
Um, so I think what's going to happen, because I mentioned earlier that I think AI helps good engineers become better and worse engineers
yeah,
worse.
yeah,
So I think there will be like in the middle ground of that pyramid, like uh, a lot of engineers who truly like want to build and innovate and be creative. That stuff will actually emerge because all of the mundane stuff will be removed from their backlogs, and they'll like actually elevate and like be more impactful to the company from a creative and innovative perspective.
mm,
A lot of the engineers who are like not so great engineers and not creative, not innovative, and like all they know is like, if the only thing they know is like how to build some React components in a kind of like mediocre way, they're probably going to have to get different jobs. It's
yeah.
going to be important, like your ability to be like to be a creative problem solver becomes more and more important in this new like post AI world.
Yeah, the it's and the well, the problems are going to stay the same. And what's I find really interesting is speaking philosophically, our existential problems are going to stay the same. Like I believe that all of our existential problems about what it means to be a human being, all these
Hmm.
questions essentially,
Hmm.
those are all going to stay exactly the same. I don't think this technology is going to fix anything in there. I do think it's going to fix a lot of our utility problems. A lot of our like, oh man, this thing doesn't work, and then the problem solved. And then this is, I believe through doing a lot of these interviews, talking to a lot of people, that AI is not fundamentally a creative thing. If we define creative as the
Correct.
discovery of new things that we don't have narratives for, it might be able to do that in the future. And so, but the organizational problems, like it's all just going to like already, if you move from an individual contributor to a management gets paid better because it's a harder job because it deals with that complex world of human issues. Uh, and so that's all going to stay the same as long as the companies stay at the same size. But then management itself will probably change significantly once companies become much smaller, if that's the case. So, and then it all pushes. So, like you said, they'll need to find other jobs. What jobs can they do? Because I see a huge rush into human relationships, things like management or sales. Um, uh, but then also there is this kind of deep tech, hard tech type of thing. But now we've got robots, like humanoid robots on the horizon,
Mhm.
which I think are going to do the same thing that AI agents are going to do, but for the physical world. So
So
yeah, go for it.
I have a really like actually I have a deep answer for that. Hmm. So I think a lot about ikigai,
Hmm.
like the combination of like finding out in yourself what matters to you, like what you want to do in the world and what you're good at and what the world needs. So I think about that a lot. And I think everyone should. It
Hmm.
can really help guide your career choices. So I would say if you find yourself as one of those like engineers who like for whatever reason, like maybe you weren't performing as
Yeah.
good as your peers, or like maybe if you really like deep down and just like look within yourself, like do you really like if you really care about building it and innovating and creative problem solving, like maybe you wouldn't be towards, that bottom slice that gets like laid off as an example. So if you just really evaluate like what you're really good at and what you really care about, it could be an opportunity for a career change. It happened with the Industrial Revolution as well. Like it's not like people can't have a job. It's just that it's a new world and you need to like reinvent yourself and kind of like realign with what you want to be doing. If you are, I mean, if you're still really interested in software and creating product, that's a great opportunity to move into like product, essentially like product management, like
Mm.
people who are directing more like
Teams of people.
people who are more in charge of like the actual product that will be built, and not necessarily like doing the details,
Mhm.
which engineers have historically done. So I think it's just like anytime there's like a big life change, like someone getting laid off or like the world changing technologically, it kind of forces people to just kind of reevaluate what they want out of life and what they want to do,
Mm.
which is painful, but it's not necessarily a bad thing.
It's life is constantly changing, and it's going to change more and more. Um, okay, so let's get into testing. So, what was testing like 2 years ago, and what is it like now?
Yeah, testing. Uh, really interestingly, so let me briefly set the
Sure.
stage of how I'm going to answer the
Yeah.
question. So for us, we don't, so our primary value proposition actually isn't to offer uh, test generation and maintenance. However, all of our customers need it as
Yeah.
part of the work that we do for them.
Uh,
So like what I mean is I've never had a customer like bang down my door saying, please, like help us like automate our test maintenance. Like it
right.
hasn't been like that big of a hair on fire problem for
Yeah.
them. For us, we get people like kicking down our door saying, please help us with, an Angular JS to React migration or like an enzyme to React testing library migration. Python 2 to Python 3, like there's a certain class of things which are mundane, but also very high value and very costly for large companies. So like that's where we get into the doors. Like we actually specialize in code-based migrations right now.
Oh, interesting.
So that's how we get into the door. But all of those customers eventually need test stuff. So like if you're doing a code-based migration, typically the customer will have existing tests.
Yeah.
So the tests that can translate over would be like functional tests. Unit tests need to be thrown away and rewritten. Like if you're changing frameworks, you need to rebuild the unit tests. So what ends up happening is we also do a lot of automation around like resolving their test situation. Um,
Yeah, I got it.
so that's a little bit of context I can share. So okay, to answer your question, um, we classify basically all testing, all natures of testing, whether that's smoke tests, unit tests, or functional tests. It's all a means to an end. It's all mundane grunt work. There's no. If an engineer comes to you and says they love writing tests, like something's wrong with that person. Like you should consider if they should be there or
Technical
not.
psych
It's
evaluation.
not a fun thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not fun to write tests.
Interesting.
It's because it's so mundane, but it's necessary. Like if you have a solid test suite, and you have high code coverage, you can have a lot of confidence that like your team making changes isn't like breaking production, so it's important. Um, so how do things change? Like, let me explain the world today. So the
Sure.
world today is if you ask 100 engineering teams on a scale of 1 to 10, how good is your testing infrastructure and how much do you trust your tests? probably one out of 100 would say it's good. Most of them would say about half of, like, I'm talking like large enterprise
Yeah.
companies.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Half of them would say, well, like, we have thousands of lines of test code, but it's all total garbage, and like it's constantly failing the builds, and like we don't really trust it, and like our code coverage isn't that great. Like
Mm.
it's a huge mess. So like a lot of like large companies, they have good intentions to set up to like have good tests, but it's a total mess, and
And
just not good at all.
why is it a
Uh,
mess? What
Prioritization.
prioritization? Yeah.
So here's what happens. So okay, imagine you're in a planning meeting. So you have a bunch of engineers. You have like an engineering manager and a product manager. The product manager is like, oh my God, there's like our customers are like going to churn if we don't have these new features
Yeah,
or
I got
these
it.
new fixes. Like the 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 business is at risk unless we like add these features
Yeah.
for this customer or like fix this bug. A product manager is never ever going to say, we should spend the next year
Doing
improving our
tests.
test infra. Never.
Yeah.
The engineers, on the other hand, they're sick and tired of their tests failing. They don't want to fix it themselves. They want someone else to do it, but
Mm.
they really wish someone would go fix it. But at the end of the day, the product managers will tend to have like the final say. And what ends up happening in the end is like, and it's the right thing for the business. Like you need to optimize for adding value to your customers. So what happens is all of these things for improving your test infra, it stays in the backlog
Mm.
infinitely,
Yeah.
forever.
Got it. Interesting.
I've seen this over and over and over, man. Like I've worked at engineering teams for over a decade, and it's the same at every company. Like you'll have like it just completely repeats in the same way. You'll
Mm.
have some engineers who just get so sick and tired of it that they like convince their engineering manager to do like, a month of work, and they set up all of this like infra to do like testing. And there's still no code coverage, but they do all of this work. And then they move on to, doing product work again. And they hope that all of the engineers at the
Ooh.
company will start writing tests, and like the test coverage will increase over time. It never happens. Like
Ooh.
it's very, very rare
Yeah.
for tests to be done well. So the reason I say all of that is the answer is it stays in the backlog and it just doesn't get done. Okay. That's the world today. In the world tomorrow, whether it's Second or some other company or tools, there's a lot of companies, by the way, that specialize in test generation, which is great.
Mm.
It's not like actually our ability to generate and maintain test, even identify like uh, low performing tests and remove those is actually very good.
Mm.
But like I said, our customers are knocking down the door for other reasons. But whether it's Second or some other set of companies or tools, like the future is uh, uh, test infra will not be in the backlog anymore. It's going to be, if all of this stuff is automated well and it doesn't require much effort from the humans, um, like any company, whether it's a startup or enterprise size company, can have solid code coverage and like solid test.
Mm.
And it'll just be like a normal thing to have that in place. Today, it's not normal to have that solid. Um, you have to be very, very intentional to get that to work well.
And like, because I imagine there are companies, this is so interesting because it got into what I was doing for the previous company I worked with, knowledge management. Knowledge management is definitely in a similar boat. And for those listeners who don't already know what it is, or maybe if you, knowledge management is essentially like you've got these large knowledge bases and everybody's writing their stuff down. In engineering, they're usually the best at it because they need to be for the documentation. But people outside of engineering, operations, marketing, all of these places essentially write things down a lot. And when you're writing these things down, it's like you're talking with a customer and you need their client file. So you create a new folder, and that new folder is named according to your weird, things about how you name things when you have to get something named quickly. And then imagine a company of 1,500 people all with that. And it's this thing that's sort of like unsolvable, that it sounds like or not unit testing specifically, but testing in general is in a similar boat, it seems like, of just this thing that's not really solvable, because for testing, it seems different.
Hmm.
For knowledge management, it's this sort of abstract thing of like an individual decision, which also AI is going to do really well, which is
That's
like,
one of AI's
yeah,
strengths.
yeah.
It's going to kill knowledge bases completely.
Yes,
Yes.
interesting. Well, let's go into that. How do you think, well, how is that going to work?
I mean, just like you described, so a knowledge base, you'll have I'll tell you what happens. So you end up
Sure.
so you have, like you said, you have engineers, salespeople, product people, uh, constantly. Like you'll even like, I mean, depending on how big your company is, you'll hire people to like pump in information into these knowledge bases. And so there's all of these like different people with different motivations and different levels of caring about the quality of the data. So it's all this random
Yeah.
stuff just kind of being stuffed in to the knowledge base. And then once it's there, then you have systems that can try to pull from it. Like classically, you'll have like a chatbot or something like on your website that can try to like pull information out and answer questions. Um, so obviously, like with AI, that whole flow goes away. And again, there's lots and lots of startups doing this exact idea. Like
Yeah.
you can very easily use AI to extract information from everywhere, from like Notion documents, Slack, Zendesk, Intercom, whatever, like wherever there's conversations and information being shared, you can extract that information. And then we all know how easy it is to set up like not how easy it is, but we all know like how like a chatbot can work, like with ChatGPT. Just put a chat interface on top of that, vector store, and that whole knowledge base and ecosystem like goes away. Like you just don't need it. Um, so like 1,000% sure, there's got to be like, man, there's got to be like hundreds or thousands of companies who are doing just that
Yeah.
right now. So like
Yeah.
that's going to be completely commoditized.
Yeah, and this is the strange thing
Yeah.
about the era that we're entering, is that essentially the way that things were done in the past may shift pretty drastically, and it's not even like the individual contribution work, but it's the example of the organization of folders and files. Like, I was thinking that,
Hmm.
yeah, I can easily organize folders and files, but the need to actually organize folders and files might also go away. Um,
Doesn't, yeah, AI doesn't care.
yeah.
There doesn't need to be folders and files.
That's a
That's an
human.
abstract like creation by us humans to try to like uh it's a weak attempt by us to try to like organize data
Yeah,
in a manual
interesting.
way.
What what will AI do, or what
I mean,
uh
AI doesn't need to organize data. It's just like a vector store of information, and then it can just extract and understand
yeah, it
from
does
that.
it has its own internal organization process. So, but then
Mhm.
the folders and files are a key thing that programmers do, but I guess they do that because the structure of the computer is that way. Will we get
Oh
a new
yeah.
paradigm of interacting with, will it just be
Uh,
voice to,
um, interacting with software.
yeah, interact. Yeah, I
Oh
guess
yeah.
it now is interacting with software slash AI, like, because it's AI is going to
Yeah,
eat.
yeah. Man, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
I also think I have the answer for that too, and it's not that like controversial or crazy or anything, but to answer your question, let me
Yeah.
say where we are today.
Yeah.
So any web application, there's like just crazy amounts of like buttons and like layouts and like all of this stuff so that people can like find information and take action on things. And it's a whole thing, right? Like UX designers, like it's a whole thing to try to put all of that together.
Yeah.
Uh, and the reason is because we have backends that can connect to databases. Ultimately, they connect to databases. And then we have systems that can manipulate that data and like serve data to the client or like take action. Um, so that all works now. Uh, with AI, that breaks down really heavily because really because really all you need is you need a bridge between the human being's intent and getting information,
Mm.
or the human being and taking action on the world. That's it. So like all of the parts in between that today, we call that like software, like web application
Got it.
software,
Yeah.
or like desktop applications or mobile applications. But now I don't think necessarily all like in the future, like it's just voice. But what's going to happen is all of that junk in between, it's going to break down heavily. And really all people need is to get information in a shape that makes sense. So that can largely be done through chat, um, potentially, um, or take action on the world. That could also be done through chat. This so like in theory, you could build a whole web application that's just a text box. You could, like so imagine like uh imagine Amazon comes out with like an announcement and they're gonna rebuild all of Amazon's shopping experience. So
Yeah.
like what would that be? So like someone goes onto the website and they type, I need some AA batteries or something. And then you get like a list of like common, like whatever, like the best brands for AA batteries. And then you
Yeah.
just like say, buy this one. So I think there's some things that can be simplified. And actually the whole like actually it could be one prompt. You say like, just find like the most common highly rated AA batteries. I just need 20. Just go ahead and buy it, as long as it'll be shipped within a week. And then like
Mm.
the system can go figure out the right data and the right actions to take to make that happen. That could work.
So
So I think in theory you could build a whole web application that way. I have more to share, but
yeah,
I'll stop there.
because I mean the challenge that a lot of people are seeing with this world, particularly AI skeptics, is that uh, that world that you described is totally outside the bounds of our visibility or mechanistic interpretability. But I think you're actually talking from the consumer angle. But then the follow-up question was essentially from the business angle, people who are actually developing these products, they're going to have to peer into that. They'll want visibility, like the ways that you guys described you're doing to agents. Um, uh,
Mhm.
because like what happens like in a resilience sense, like do we know enough about these AIs to understand whether what they're doing is either efficient enough, or the other ethical questions that a lot of people ask as well is like, are they, do they have ulterior motives? And what's your take on any of that that you want to go into?
Oh gosh. I think in terms of observability, like so one thing I wanted to add before I answer that question
Sure.
is I think there okay, so like I was saying, like today, like all ways to interact with a system is through a UI.
Yeah.
That's the world today. I think the world of tomorrow will be kind of a mix. Like there's certain flows where a conversation with a chat, like a chat GPT type of interface, is actually much more efficient than like clicking through, 10 screens. Okay, so what'll like survival of the fittest, right? What'll eventually happen is like flows where natural language makes sense will just dominate, and certain other types of flows
Yeah.
where like the user
Yeah.
needs like more like catered information around the decisions they're making in a visual way, like there will still be some UIs for that. But I think like overall, like user interfaces will be greatly simplified. I'm pretty sure of that. I'm not. I wouldn't bet that all software will just be conversational, but I think UIs will be simplified.
Will be simplified. I'm sure.
Um,
Yeah.
about like I don't know, man. Like about observability and like ethics. So you mentioned like this age-old question of like, is the AI going to do something bad or like
Yeah.
try to overpower the humans? I don't know. I don't really see that yet, but it's obviously possible. Obviously, the scary thing is when AI enters the real world, like with
Mm.
robotics, like in like figure one, that's when things start to feel a little bit more real. Like if you have a robot walking around your house, like I told my kids about that. My kids are 9 and 11, sorry, 9 and 11, and they're terrified of that idea
Yeah.
of a robot walking around doing chores.
Have
I
they
think it
seen
would be awesome, but they're
have,
actually scared of that
have they
idea.
seen Terminator? Have they seen Terminator?
No,
They
no,
haven't
no.
seen Terminator, but they it must be in the ether as a kid right now.
Just like, I mean, kids are just, they're scared of like the boogeyman or like potential like
yeah.
they imagine like monsters, like under the bed or in the closet. And I think like there's something just really uncanny or nerve-wracking, I think, for some people. Maybe not all kids are this way, but like having like a being
Yeah.
walking around the house and
Yeah.
like
Got it.
talking to, like there's something that feels
And
scary about like,
that's the
yeah,
uncanny valley. That's the uncanny valley,
yeah.
basically. Yeah. And
But I think I don't think that will always be the case. I think people will be weird about it at first, but then once it becomes normal, it just becomes like a regular like Roomba thing, like going around your house, doing stuff.
yeah, AI enabled Roomba. Wait, do you know how the Roomba work? Is it computer vision or it's laser
Um,
thing?
I have one. It's a combination. It is using ML.
Okay,
It's not using computer vision. I don't know if there's like there's probably more advanced versions, but it's not using computer vision, but it is using a lot of different sensors
got it.
and some AI to like navigate and figure out like what actions to take.
And
Yeah.
you have to go at the hour.
I can talk for as long as you like.
Okay. So the robot thing is really interesting. There, it's so hard to know what's going to happen. So Terminator AI agents. I kind of want to go back to agents and like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
the what. How hard is it? Could I actually, as a beginner programmer, how do I get? What's the smallest thing that I can do in order to get an agent up and running or playing around with agents?
Um, Gosh, I don't have a recommendation at the top of my head, although there are lots and lots of these companies who are building like AI agent builder types of applications, like no code types of things. Um, I don't have a list at the top of my head, but I can make some recommendations
So,
for you
and
afterwards. But
I'll
I
just
will say there are lots of these. Like if you Google it, you'll find
AI.
a handful and you can search around. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm so interested in this world in which AI becomes really, really good at software engineering. Uh,
Hmm.
and then also I get the tools of that AI doing it without so much of the complexity. And also the strange thing is that it just answers all my questions now. So, and that was the main degree of problem before. It was the time in between which I have a problem and the ability to get the information or talk to a normal person, a live person. That was the biggest challenge because I learned really well in this format where somebody's speaking with me directly and I can ask questions immediately.
Hmm. Yep.
So then now I have that with the AI. It's still chat like. But I like this idea of building the software from the ground up with the AI and agents. And so, actually, how many agents do you guys have?
We've actually fluctuated, so it's
Okay.
constantly changing. We had at most 12 different types of agents.
Okay.
I would
12.
say now we have about I think about five. So it kind of goes up and down
Got it.
depending
And
on how we combine things. But one thing I wanted to
sure.
say about what you were mentioning there, there's really, in terms of incorporating AI with software development, there's like more specifically, there's two layers. Okay, there's you, the human, doing work, and you need an assistant. You need help, like working collaboratively together. That's the co-pilot, like AI assistant type of thing, like the AI living in your IDE.
Mm.
Okay.
Yep.
That's one whole layer by itself. The other layer is like the autopilots, which is more like agent-driven, like second types of companies where you have this system like working across the whole code base, usually in some patternized way, like making huge changes to like thousands of files, or like observing the code base and like looking for opportunities of improvement or looking for problems and notifying humans
Uh,
that there's a problem or even like retroactively fixing issues as well. So there's those two layers, and I think the future of software development, it's just both of those. You're going to have every human will have like these assistants, and they also have the agents like doing stuff more autonomously.
Yeah, okay. So the autopilot versus co-pilot, that's a very good framework. So far, I've only interacted with
Hmm.
Copilot. And if I go to one of these AI agent builder websites, I'll interact with the autopilot. But I guess that's the thing about the autopilot is it's not something I direct, basically. But you said there's a management layer. So let's go back into how you are actually managing these agents. Like, in what ways do they go wrong?
Oh, uh, they go wrong in all kinds of ways. Like that's the challenge. Like building AI agents for code generation is like, I think it's one of the harder. I'm not gonna say it's a hard. It's a hard application of AI. Because with code, like code is very precise. It either works or it doesn't. It's very binary.
Yeah.
Um, although like I'm gonna compare it to like Midjourney or like
Yeah.
Sora, like image generation and video generation, although like very complex in its own right. Whenever it generates something, it's a lot more like hand wavy if it's right or wrong, you know?
Yes. Yep.
So like as long as like the humans have, 5 fingers and like their face doesn't morph into a frog or something like obviously weird,
Unless
it
you
can
want
be
that.
considered correct,
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you're generating like an AI video and like the human like runs left or runs right, like it kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like there's lots of variants where correctness is fine. Code is not that way. Like one single line of code that's wrong, and like the logic can be wrong. The preferred styles from the engineers could be wrong. It could not compile, like it could not run. So like it's very, very touchy, which is what makes it so hard. So the things that can go wrong, we've been working on this problem for over a year,
Yeah.
and there's still more to do. For us for second. Um, there's just so many like so many ways, from like using AI to gather information from the code base,
Uh,
making decisions. Are the decisions correct? Can the decisions be modified by a human? Um, Executing on decisions, making code changes, like even chat completions, that whole flow. The code that comes back could be wrong. Maybe your prompts aren't correct. Maybe the AI doesn't have enough information and like hallucinates some weird stuff. And so all of that has to be ironed out. Even if like the AI has all the right information and context, it can still at times produce bad results, and you need to you need to have ways to validate the code. So like we have all of these different validators that check for like static analysis. We check that like the application can compile. We check for like imports and like dependencies. Uh, we check like if the application can run. Like there's all of these validators that we can do for each code change to like maximize the chances that just one single change is good.
wow.
Like all of those things,
Whoa.
and like all the limitations around like context windows and like rate limiting, like the amount of ways that things cannot work is very high, which is why like we've been banging our head on this
Yeah.
problem for over a year, and it's still there's still more to do.
Yeah.
So this is like there's so many ways that it can go wrong, and this is why for the past year and a half, Twitter and LinkedIn is just completely being flooded by hype videos. Like everyone and their uncle like puts together some like cool hype video of like,
Yeah.
hey, make me Facebook, and
Yeah.
then it makes like a Facebook
Yeah. It's
page.
in a
Like,
bunch of them. That's what it got me into coding.
uh, it's very very hypey. Okay,
Yeah.
because like the difference between like most of these hype videos and building something that like kind of works like as a hobby is still very wide.
Yes.
The gap between these hype videos and like
Engineering.
production quality code at an insurance company, like a Forbes 500 company or something, is like infinitely wide. Like there's
Yeah.
so many things that can go wrong
Yeah.
between those 2 points,
Yeah.
which is why You mentioned like Devon, like that's kind of like the most recent one. It looks
Yep.
like I think they're doing some cool things, but still like all of this is very early, and like the delta between the hype video and like real life is still very high.
Yeah, well, and
We
that's
think,
what yeah, go for it.
yeah. I was gonna say I think for second we're getting close. Like we're able to transform code bases today for our
Yeah.
enterprise customers. There's just like to get to this point, there's just so many like like every day we're like knocking out like 5 to 10 ways that things can go wrong and like making sure those things
Yeah.
don't go wrong.
Because
And then eventually, like when everything is covered, when you have like a whole system where like plans are editable,
yeah.
validators, recovery strategies, like all like ability to suck in context, when all of that is working, then you start to have a system that really starts to work actually. But it's hard. It's definitely not easy.
And the hype thing is really funny because I definitely fell into that. Like it's and I've fell into it many times now. And it's so funny my journey uh, to learning how to code again because I started off with this idea. Okay, I'll just do all the tutorials. I'll just screenshot them, put it in Chat GPT. As long as it does it, it works. Then I move on. I understand the
Mhm.
concepts. I try to understand the concepts behind everything, but I just have it actually generate the code. And so I'm like, okay, then the only thing that I will need to know is how to read the code. And so I started learning how to read the code because I was noticing that as I was building my website that I couldn't understand the actual code, so I needed to read the code. And it's like, okay, that's
So
what I need to do. We're almost done. And I'm like, okay, well, then what's the best way to learn how to read code? It's to write code. Because then you get actually
right.
read the code. So it's like I'm all the way back at square one again. But now I have a superhuman, super intelligence
Yeah.
that at my
Well,
side.
let me tell you a quick secret.
Yeah.
So uh any system that can build um like say a web page or something from a small prompt, understand that when real web applications are built, that same amount of code
Yeah.
to be generated actually could have taken hundreds of hours to get to like a production level state. The reason is uh, when engineers are working on software, they spend a ton of time figuring out how to put in the right, like there's so much like logic baked into a
Yes.
small amount
Got
of code. It's actually hard to it's hard
it.
to fathom unless like if you were to open up if you were to go to like Google or whatever, like some large company and look at a code file and look at the commit history, you'd see like hundreds and hundreds of like little like details put in. And so what happens is like a real life piece of code is something that has like an immense amount of detail packed
Yes.
in a very specific way.
Yeah.
And that's why it works in production. But these tools that will just generate like some crappy like HTML and like throw
Yeah.
in some
Yeah.
like a few like React hooks that like on click open up an alert window or something. It's not real. Like it's like that stuff like can be done manually, like in like five or 10 minutes as well. But like the actual like real life production code, I mean, look at like I don't know, look at Twitter, like
Uh,
or X. Like the
yeah.
the web application doesn't seem that complicated, but there's like millions and millions of engineering hours put into making it, production quality. So what you're getting from like a lot of these like hypey types of tools is just kind of like surface level code, which I think it has value for like prototyping or quickly putting together like interfaces, but that's very different from building software.
And well, there's a couple different questions. I would love to ask you about refactoring your code. Have you ever used the AI to refactor your code? And for my listeners, refactoring is essentially when you take code that's long and you make it shorter, but doing the same thing. And maybe correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, so we've used Second. So like Second can be pretty free form. Like you describe what you're looking to change, and it can run across like the whole code base or like multiple files. So obviously like IDEs like VS Code, they're going to have lots of like refactor capabilities baked in for like things that are pretty easily patternized. But there's lots of things that IDEs can't do. So like any like large refactoring that needs to be done that requires interpretation of the code, like not just like looking at like not using like a regex to find like variables or something, but like understanding the intent of the code and then changing it. You need to use AI for that.
Uh,
Um,
Interesting.
yeah, I think AI, I mean, in a sense, like second is like you could think of it as like one subset of what we offer. You could think of it as like AI powered refactors. You could think of it that way.
Interesting.
And I think second and other tools like you'll see more and more of that. Like, so what's different about refactoring is you're not okay. One of the reasons like why we're doing second is because, like I mentioned earlier, AI is not very good at building production quality code from scratch. Like there's too much information that has to be packed in for it to be correct. Like maybe if you wrote like a huge novel describing every single detail that would be needed, it could work, but like engineers don't know, they don't have all that information in their heads when they start to work. So like one of the reasons why I chose to work on second specifically is we're not generating like we're not generating code, we're translating. We're
Oh,
we're taking existing like human engineers
yeah.
have already put so much thought
Oh,
and
interesting.
intentionality into the code.
Yeah.
All we're doing is like understanding it and transforming it to a different state. And
Got it.
AI is actually very, very good. It's very
Uh,
good at understanding and transforming, but it's not great at generating code from scratch.
which is so funny because that's the hype has gotten into my head, and I'm grateful for it because it's led me into an interesting path. But there's so much work left to be done. I'd never heard of that transforming. That it's better as transformer. So what
Hmm.
does that mean in practice? Does that mean like so you built agents in order to go in that Copilot versus autopilot framework? Well, no, have you guys built Copilots or is it only
So
autopilot?
I don't consider Copilot like a competitor. They work together.
I
Um,
I'm not saying Copilot the company as well, but the framework you had mentioned between autopilot and
sure.
Copilot
Oh,
versus
sure,
like
sure. Oh, yeah.
as an agent
Yeah.
framework, basically. Yeah, yeah,
Uh, uh, so we don't do anything in the IDE.
got it.
We're very focused on agents. I'll tell you why. One reason, um, from a business perspective. So like the early stages of a startup, you're navigating the idea maze, right?
Yeah,
So one of the things I thought very carefully about early on is who has the right to win in the IDE? Probably Visual Studio Code
yeah,
or Microsoft
yeah.
or GitHub. And the scary thing is like GitHub, like immediately, like I think I don't know what their vision statement is right now, their mission statement, but they've kind of like very clearly put all of their chips into Copilot. Like they're very
Interesting.
focused on
Yeah,
the assistance
yeah,
and the IDE.
yeah,
That company has the right to win there.
yeah,
I don't want to go head to head with that.
yeah, yeah.
So I think they could win there. The AI agent stuff, like that's a whole open field. That's kind of square one for everyone. And so that's where we wanted to compete was at
And
that
it's
level.
and it seems vast because the what I'm getting from this conversation is that, and I've already known it, but now it's just gotten another layer, which is the complexity of software is such a large difference between the way that we interact with software because we've had millions of engineering hours to go into the software to make it not complex, to make it very simple.
Mhm.
And then so the difference between when somebody just interacts with software versus when they actually try to build it is so large. Uh, and so it's so complex, and you have these large companies with millions of lines of codes, millions of engineering hours going into this one application, and you got 6 engineers working at Google to redo their sign up form.
Mhm.
And
No, I literally I have a friend I used to work with who worked at Google. He literally spent like an entire year working on some A/B test at Google for a button or like a link on like
so
one of the ads or something. Like that was it.
how does it
Like
work? How
very
does it
specific.
how does it work in that organization? Like, how does it take, is that for a real reason that it just takes a lot of time to do that A/B testing because it's connected to all these other parts of the application? Or is it more the bureaucracy element where it's just like you have to talk to so many people in order to do it?
It's both.
It's both.
Because
Okay.
like it's actually the reason it's both.
Yeah.
It's for the same reason. So like as you increase the number of people working together, the number of communication channels increase exponentially, and it just becomes really hard to like move. Like you have to like if you have to talk to 100 people every time you do something, you're just paralyzed. So you have to be like there's a whole other philosophy about like how to like
Do that.
organize, teams to reduce that.
Yeah.
But that's one problem. The same thing can be said about software, where the more systems that you have that communicate with each other,
Oh,
the more
shit.
complex things get. So like the communication problem, that
Yeah, it's a problem no matter
exponential
what.
communication channels, it happens for both software and people.
And for software, it's because the application is growing in scope. And then,
Yeah.
and also the amount of people who are interacting with it as a consumer or as a business owner is
Yeah.
also growing. So those two
Uh
combined.
yeah. Let me give you a really specific example. Uh I was the architect of the LinkedIn homepage
Oh, interesting.
many years ago. So like building, so I designed like how like the millions of combinations of LinkedIn feed items are put together, how it's rendered, like all the performance stuff, everything. So like a feed, like that homepage feed, it looks pretty simple, but to architect the system to build all of those variations is really, really complex. Okay.
Oh,
And like most large companies, so LinkedIn has, an A/B testing framework. And what that means is product managers want to test variations of every single little feature. Like one feature on that page could have like five variations, and like we make the button like kind of blue for 10% of the companies, or like 20% of the companies. There's like a border around it, like something like that.
oh,
Now imagine all of those like variants of A/B testing stuff is done like hundreds of times all over the page, or thousands of
yeah,
times.
got it.
So
Wow.
one simple application suddenly lives in like a multiverse, and there's like millions of like combinations of what the page could be, and then throw on top of like all of the insane like performance improvements that need to be made, or
Yeah.
like all of this stuff to make it run fast, like security, like all of the stuff that needs to be done to prevent people from hacking into like the fields. Like there's like so like the LinkedIn homepage, you could build that UI in one day,
Yeah.
but like it would take years and years to like do all of to cover all of the
The
edge cases,
variation.
to make it production quality.
Yeah, to all the variation. And so we mentioned it's not that great AI, going back to AI, it's not that great at generation. It's great at transforming. It's great at moving things from one things to another, making it look different. Or yeah, and it's good at that for writing as well. That's a good point. So
Mhm.
essentially the because I noticed that I'm a writer, so I know what it takes to write, and I know that ChatGPT is not a great writer, and neither is Claude. None of them. I will be. It's like it doesn't. It takes me less time to write my own things, but
Yeah, it's gonna write like it just averages out the internet and then writes that way.
it's funny. Yeah. And then now I didn't have enough experience in coding to understand that it's probably doing the same thing in coding when it generates the code.
Yeah, like I mean, GPT-4, it's going to be trained on all of the open source stuff on GitHub. So like
Yeah.
it essentially, so like if you think of it that way, GPT-4 is trained on a bunch of crappy like side projects, or like leak code things, and like people writing articles about like how to pass like, a binary search tree or something. So it knows those things pretty well. But like an enterprise code base, which is what we've
Yeah, got it.
specialized in,
Yeah,
it won't
interesting.
know anything about.
Yeah.
Actually, a quick example there. We um, we realized so like one of our customers, there's a lot of stuff around like A/B flags for like the work we're doing for them. And GPT-4 doesn't seem to understand the concept of a feature flag. So we had to like really be explicit about what, like in our prompt engineering, like what a feature flag is and like how it should work. And I think that's because like there's not a whole lot of code out on GitHub that's doing like production level stuff, like feature flags as an example. That it's one guess on my end, but
It's a good guess. And
yeah.
do you think that, so my understanding of the way that training works, and I used to work at a company doing AI training, so I think it's a pretty good understanding that they to train a large language model takes billions of dollars, it takes huge amounts of energy, and they just had to garble as much data as possible to make it work. So now we've done that, no one needs to do that again. There are other people doing that, and there's open source versions, which I like. Uh, and so, but now it becomes like, now it's going to be about expert models, like making sure that we have real good expertise. Do you know of any companies that are specifically training? Like, well, actually, here's a good question for you, because the other option to training a knowledge an LLM from scratch is to fine tune it, and
Mhm.
so it does fine tuning mixed with, say, like training it on an enterprise code database, or training it on molecular biology, or training it from professors' writings on that. Um, is that enough, or in order to get these expert models, do we have to go back and retrain them, or actually train?
Yeah, yeah, I can talk a little bit about the spectrum there, and also, so I just realized I will have to go in about 4 minutes,
I do. Okay. Okay.
but I can answer that.
Yep.
Actually, maybe a few minutes, but I
Yep.
can answer that question. Yeah, the full spectrum is, yeah, you spend millions or billions of dollars building a foundational model. That's the first level, and then on top of that, you can do the fine tuning, which costs a
Mm.
lot less, but you have to get all of the data. You have to get a substantial amount of data to do the training, which is a lot of work in its own right. On top of that, so the next level, it's like that's level one and level two. Level three would be RAG.
Yeah.
So RAG is the simplest, like so RAG is pretty solid. So with RAG, like you don't build a new model, you don't fine tune a model, you pick the model that's closest to what you need, and then for every like chat completion or every like call that you're making for inference, um, you're pulling in like it's like just in time training where you pull
Mm.
in information that the AI would need at just that moment and you add it to your prompt. So like you have like the
Oh,
user's like question or like the instruction, and then you add a bunch of contextual information
cool.
below it. And so that combined can give you some really good results. So RAG is really common these days. So for us, so that's just the model, like
Yeah.
just like the inference and like chat completions. The whole other level is agents. So like
Uh,
agents and LLM apps are like two different approaches. Um, so for agents, you're building a system that's like making decisions and like taking action and like it's really more of um like an entity going around and doing things. So like an agent is using LLMs to do like different
interesting.
things. So like for us, like when we run a job for one of our customers, like we'll make hundreds or thousands of AI calls.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so like it's these agents like using AI to make
Yeah. Yeah.
decisions and
So they
and
can run up your bill.
query, get information, and uh like transform code and like run like git commands and like run file system commands. So like it's all of these different things combined. That gives you very good results. So we like for us, like where we're innovating is the agents on the agents specifically, knowing that models are becoming very commoditized.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're not gonna like, we're a small startup. I'm not gonna spend millions of dollars or millions of hours like building models and fine tuning yet. So just expecting for that to continually improve and be commoditized. We're building everything
Yeah.
around,
Cool.
the model. But I think for us, there's another aspect to mention. very likely we'll probably like later on when our company becomes more robust, we probably will build smaller models for different use cases. We might even like we have these things called modules which specialize. Uh, we use AI to build like plans which are executed, and those are kind of like cached. And we have like context that's combined with that plan. And so like what a module is we have an Angular JS to React module, and it kind of packages all of this stuff up together. Um, and so like in the future, we might have like instead of like using, GPT-4 and Claude or like Gemini or whatever, we might have like very small specific models like just for that task. Like maybe we have a model
Yeah,
that
interesting.
is
Yeah,
very, very good at just like Angular JS to React. And that module could package up that model in that case. So I think the future is like the future for us is kind of a combination of all of those, but I think it's the same for other companies. So
yeah.
it's either like build foundational model, fine tune, use RAG, build agents, or build your own like small, tiny. Um, they're called like small language models.
Small language models. Yes. I'm gonna go do a bunch of research on that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the
Yeah,
show.
yeah.
How can people find out about Second?
Yeah, just head over to second.dev. It's free to sign up. If you want to get in touch, you can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Discord.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Cool. All right, man. It's nice to meet you. I'll talk to you later.